often say that solo leveling is hard carried by action and animation and art, and it's just basically a shonen slop fest of action. And that's truly unfortunate, because I feel like there's just so much depth, parallels, and character acting on display, especially in the anime adaptation for solo leveling, that really just goes unnoticed, or at the very least, not talked about as often as it should. Because let's get right into that one. I mean, on the positive side of the community, usually when you see discussions of solo leveling, to be fair, it's usually only about the art, animation, and action. I mean, most of the conversation around this episode is literally about this action sequence where the characters are fighting the high orcs, and to be fair, it's a really good segment. Like, this entire segment is beautiful. The storyboarding and everything done here, you can feel the passion from the animators when they were working on this. This is a good scene. It's legitimately amazing, and it makes a lot of sense why everybody talks about it when it comes to solo leveling. So in the negative side of things, obviously people are quick to basically say that it is just an action cardboard cutout slop fest, because that's all they ever see. That's only the positives and praises they ever see from the community of solo leveling and what they talk about, which I feel is just so disingenuous and inaccurate, because there's so much more on display with this series besides just that. And so today, before I really dive headfirst into this action sequence and really talk about it, I really want to give some in-depth analysis and discussion to Jinwoo as a character, but also what this episode did for the story, because I feel like there needs to be some justice done for solo leveling. I've just been seeing it a lot, and it makes me honestly upset. It's tragic. It's a tragedy just seeing not many people really mention this in their discussion videos of solo leveling. So let's get right into it first thing. We have this segment at the beginning of the episode where Jinwoo is joining the mining team once again. He's offered another job, and he goes back to the site the next morning, and everybody looks at him and is like, you know, oh, we're happy to have you, man. Like, thank you for joining us and stuff. Like, they're greeting him with smiles on their faces, and this entire segment basically showcases what Jinwoo no longer has. What he used to have, but no longer has. And the reason for that is because a lot has changed. He has become a lot stronger, people have died, he has been betrayed by people, there's just so much has happened. He has taken lives, and he can no longer go back to what he once was, for obvious reasons. And we have seen the gradual descent of his personality, or his, humanity, better, way to apply to him. His descent of humanity, and how he no longer feels as attached to his humanity as he once did, which makes sense, all things considered. Let's look at what has been revealed in just the last few episodes alone. I mean, Jinwoo, even if he wants to return back to a normal life, it's going to be impossible. He is going to be, in the next day, an S rank. And obviously, giving the title of an S rank, Hunter, that is a prestigious title to have. And everybody around the world is going to be talking about that, so he will never have a normal life ever again. Regardless, if he wanted to, he will always be the talk of the town, people discuss him, he will always be used as a resource, so to speak, to be able to rein people in throughout the world, but also different dungeons as well. It makes a lot of sense. Just that alone already detaches him from the normal person, and even the normal hunter, because S-rank hunters are already in a class in of themselves amongst other hunters, and when you're in an S-class rank, you already might as well be viewed as like a demigod, so to speak, because nobody else really can compare to you. So, already in that alone, his attachment to reality is already starting to wane. But then, you get into the fact that he is someone that is able to continuously increase in power. He is getting stronger as the story progresses, and everything from what we know so far, and this isn't spoilers, it's just common sense, there is no upper limit to his strength. We have seen it that it doesn't seem to appear to be a level cap. There seems to be like no limit to what he can learn and what abilities he can achieve. So theoretically, he keeps fighting in dungeons, killing bosses, gaining equipment and stuff. Eventually, he's going to become so strong that even the S classes are going to look like E classes to him. They're not going to even be able to challenge him. They will look like literal bugs on the wall in comparison to him. And you got to factor this in what I already talked about. In S-Class, you're already basically in a league of your own. You're already viewed as something as a monster. And so imagine someone that becomes so powerful that an S-Class looks like an E-Class to them. Jinwoo's attachment to humanity will eventually stretch beyond limits. And that is definitely something that is being presented within the story very gradually and subtly. It's not fully pushed in your face, but it has definitely been there ever since he took his first life back in Season 1. And it has continuously been a thing that's been there, showing that he doesn't have as many connections as he once did. Or at the very least, he's not actively trying to forge as many connections as he did. He tries to keep at a distance. He doesn't try to let people die, but at the very least, he doesn't really want to make as many friends as he possibly can, because obviously he has been betrayed. And he even mentions that within this episode as well, which I'll segue into in a moment. The point of the matter is that Jinwoo is increasingly getting stronger, and eventually, it's going to be a subconscious thing to where he's not going to look at, probably some humans the same way as other humans, because of just how powerful he has become. And it's pretty sad. At the very least, the way the story is being depicted and how it's presenting him as a character, that's what it looks like. And so, there is some level of depth to his character, besides him just obviously, I gotta get stronger, I am solo leveling, I summon the shadows, all stuff like that. There's a lot more to him than just the obvious stuff that you see within the series. So like I said, I feel like there's such a disservice to not just him as a character, but the series, because of the glorious character acting that is on display that is very, very subtle. And since I just mentioned it, let's talk about his betrayal and how Jinwoo was reminded of how he was betrayed in the past. We get this whole segment here at the end of the episode where the whole team that was leading Jinwoo into here, he was basically carrying their equipment, they are willing to put their life on the line and die for him to try to get him out. And obviously, this comes across as like your typical cliche of heroes and stuff doing good things, but we gotta look at what the world has presented thus far within the story of solo leveling. To this very point, everyone that has been around Jinwoo, to some degree, has been very selfish. You've had party leaders and major power players that have basically been very selfish. They focused on their own survival, they focused on their strong members, and they were willing to throw their E ranks or C ranks, D ranks, whatever, to the wolves to be basically devoured and destroyed. Hell, let's look at, the dungeon break, or not the dungeon break, the red dungeon we had a previous episode ago. Basically, when you factor that in, we have seen this time and time again, to where, people usually in these powerful positions, they abuse that power, and they, take advantage of others to some degree. And so, Jinwoo has been someone that has obviously faced persecution, someone that has been pushed to the side because he was labeled as weak. He's also someone that has been basically used as a decoy, so to speak. So when you factor all this in, him seeing a party that is actually trying to do the right thing is pretty much a shocker to him, because usually it's a survival of the fittest and that's it, and then, the weak die, so to speak. But them willing to die for him showcases not just the character of these individuals, but also the guild itself that is being able to cultivate these individuals. It showcases they got this far because of teamwork and good nature and goodwill, instead of trying to push people aside to be able to achieve power. And I think one of the big indications of this actually was in the middle of the episode. Before the High Orcs were obviously introduced, one of the big things, or actually it was after the High Orcs were introduced, correction, my bad. We had a decision from the captain where he could have chose to stay to keep going forward. And obviously, they still were forced to go forward within the dungeon, but the actual character acting here and what he decided to do really showed who he was as a person and why he even got this role in the first place. He decided that they would return. Like, for instance, they would go back and leave the dungeon because obviously it seemed way too dangerous. And if this was anything to go on, we have seen previous captains and stuff get head over heels with their own power and strength, and other teammates, they thought they could take the entire dungeon regardless of the signs that they definitely couldn't. But this captain individual felt like it wasn't safe and wanted to back out. And I think that shows a lot to his character. It showcases that he is someone you can look upon and be like, I'm glad he's a leader. At the very least, he's trying to care about people besides his own achievements. And obviously, he does want to achieve something. And I think the episode does try to paint that. It tries to showcase that he does want to have a successful dungeon because he will get promoted potentially and look better in the guild. But obviously, backing out could hurt his chances. But it is a good reflection on a leader to know when something cannot be done. So I love this little scene. It adds a lot more depth to the characters as well, and shows that they're not just cardboard cutouts. The world is lived in, and there is progress and stuff, and it's not just Jinwoo progressing as well. But one thing though I will say is that this episode does a really good job with little scenes like that. I mean, we have some really gradual stuff set up throughout the episode. I mean, we have this whole smelling scene, which comes off as comedic as well, but obviously what we found out from her is that hunters smell awful to her. We don't know necessarily why, but obviously Jinwoo doesn't, and it's probably because he's a player, which he even talked about this episode. So it comes to make you wonder what's going on there. Why does all the other hunters smell to her, but he doesn't? But, yeah, I mean, like I said, there's a lot more going on with this episode besides what people normally talk about, action and stuff, and like I said, I feel like it's just completely a disservice to what the series has to offer. Now, with all of that being said, let's actually get into the action and animation, because obviously, there's a lot of good here. This episode is legitimately amazing looking. I love what it looks like, and I love getting to see this vast teamwork from them. Like, look at this. Like, I'm not gonna lie, seeing a human character beat the absolute crap out of a monster to some degree, a big monster, will never get old to me. I absolutely love it when you just see someone go hands-on brawling with fist or whatever, and they beat the absolute crap out of a monster. I love that stuff, man. It's so cool. I like that in video games and stuff, and, you know, seeing, like, some of this action we got in the episode, it's everything I like. It's like something I would like from a video game or any action sequence. It just, it felt very good. There was definitely a lot of liberties taken with these sections that, you know, expanded upon the original content from the webcomic. And once again, this shows the passion of the team. They really do love solo leveling, and A1 Pictures, they're really cooking. They are really, really cooking for this show. They are trying their absolute best. Now, one thing I want to say is at the end of the episode, we get this whole hallway scene, and I think this does a lot to really build up, obviously, the next episode, but also the hierarchy of this dungeon. Obviously, what we've seen in the middle of this episode, the high orcs are very powerful. They're no joke. Obviously, Jinwoo was able to deal with them pretty easily. He didn't even use his shadows, but it's clear they're very powerful. They're able to take monsters from C-rank dungeons, make them basically servants and, like, guard dogs, so to speak. You can see that the way the orcs are lined up and all that with the hierarchy and the different equipment on, that there is clear indication that these orcs on the side are a lot more powerful than the orcs they were fighting in the dungeon, the entrance of the dungeon, so to speak. But then when you see the actual leader in the front when he is introduced, you can just see that, like, his ornaments, like, the way he is dressed up and everything. You can see that this is a man that has fought a lot. This is a man that has gotten a lot of achievements. He is respected by his underlings. He's incredibly powerful, and he is well-spoken. And I think this shows a lot, because up to this very point within solo leveling, besides obviously the else we saw in the previous episodes, most of the enemies, they don't speak. They don't. And we're now starting to encounter more enemies that just straight up are able to speak to the hunters, and it shows that as the story progresses, that means that the entities are going to become more intelligent. It's not going to be just mindless monsters fighting. It's going to be enemies that are actually able to speak their opponents and probably learn and fight against them. So Jinwoo himself is eventually going to encounter stuff like that, to where it will be harder than what he ever expected. So I like that stuff. But, the question you have to run into now is what's going to happen next. Obviously, this is the boss of the dungeon. If he is defeated, that basically means it's GG, and the dungeon will close. But the thing is that, will Jinwoo sit around and watch them all die, or will he step in? There's a lot of things that can happen here. It's going to be a test to his character. It will showcase, like, his development as well, and also his attachment to humanity, whatever decision he comes up with in the upcoming episode. But whatever happens, it's going to be glorious. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much. May all of you have a fantastic day or night wherever you live. Be safe, stay healthy. Chibi out.